In 1872, a leather saddlebag rode out of the Nueces Strip on a sorrel horse and held four things: a square of sun-dried beef, a folded cloth of tortillas, a small cone of brown sugar, and a waxed paper packet that fed cowboys on both sides of the Rio Grande for 100 years. That packet is number 1 on this list. Number 19 rode tied to the saddle horn instead. Number 8 got eaten cold, straight from a tin cup, because no fire could be lit at night during a drive. These 25 meals were not chuckwagon food. They were saddlebag food, ridden into the brush by men whose grandmothers cooked it and whose grandsons forgot it. Hit subscribe before we count down the 25 forgotten meals Mexican cattlemen carried in their saddlebags. Number 25, Calabacitas con queso wrapped in cloth. A vaquero's wife packed this when the herd stayed close to the ranch, and the ride was only a day. Squash, corn, and a handful of fresh cheese cooked down in a clay pot the night before, then spooned onto a square of muslin and tied at the corners. The cloth absorbed the moisture so the food did not turn the saddle leather sour. The vaquero ate it cold at midday in 1881, scooping the squash out of the cloth with a folded tortilla. It was the closest thing to a home meal that ever rode the trail in Coahuila. Most cattlemen only got it during roundup week when their wives rode out to camp. The rest of the year was harder food, the simple ones, the ones that did not need a kitchen behind them. And here is the thing your great-great-grandmother understood that nobody on your phone today understands. A meal wrapped in cloth tastes different than a meal wrapped in plastic. You can argue with that. She would not have. Number 24, Capirotada saved for the trail. Now this was the bread pudding cooked for Lent, sweetened with piloncillo, layered with raisins and queso seco. The vaquero's mother saved a corner of the pan, wrapped it in a flour sack, and pressed it into the saddlebag the morning he rode out. It was meant to remind him of home. It also kept 4 days in the heat without spoiling. He ate it slow on Sunday, the day a working cowboy could not light a cooking fire on the open range. A boy of 15 chewing Capirotada on horseback in 1875 was a boy whose mother in Saltillo was thinking of him at the same hour. That mattered. The cinnamon and the piloncillo and the raisins were not just sweet, they were a message. The thing you miss when you read about trail food is that half of it was not nutrition. Half of it was a letter from home that you ate. Your grandmother knew that. Your great-grandmother knew that. Number 23, twice-baked stale tortillas. When yesterday's corn tortillas had gone hard and curled, they were not thrown out. The mother dried them a second time over the coals until they cracked like a roof tile. Then she stacked them, tied them with twine, and slipped the stack into the saddlebag. A working vaquero in 1858 broke one in half, dipped it in his coffee, and ate it like a cracker. Mexican soldiers in the War of 1846 carried the same thing. The old-timers in Coahuila called them gallinitas, little hens, because they made a clucking sound when snapped in half. They lasted 2 weeks in the heat. You can buy a sleeve of saltines today for $1.50. The vaquero made his own from yesterday's bread. The result was the same. The dignity was different. Your grandmother on a Sunday in 1962 was still doing it the old way on a comal in El Paso. Number 22, Caldillo Durangueño in a tin cup. The vaquero, who rode out of Durango in 1880, carried a small enameled cup tied to his belt. Before the sun came up, the camp cook ladled this thick stew of dried beef, green chile, onion, and broth into the cup. The vaquero clamped the lid down, wrapped the cup in a folded blanket to hold the heat, and tied it to the saddle. By mid-morning, the caldillo was cold. He drank it like a soup, the meat soft from the long simmer, the chile waking him up. Caldillo means little broth. It was poor food and rich food at the same time. A working man with a cup of caldillo was not hungry, and the ranch did not promise him more than that. Now, here is the part that surprised me when I read the old camp logs. The vaqueros preferred their caldillo cold. They said the cold made the beef taste older. Older was better. You can still find caldillo cooked in Durango on Sunday afternoons, in the same clay pots that have been on those stoves for 40 years. Your abuela might call it a different name. The dish is the same. Number 21, Frijoles de la olla, cold from the pot, the simple bean. Cooked in a clay olla overnight with onion, salt, and a piece of pork fat, then poured into a small tin lard pail with a wire handle. The saddlebag held the pail upright. The vaquero ate the beans cold, with a spoon carved from cow horn, sitting on a flat rock at noon. There was no glamour in this meal. There was protein that worked in a body riding 12 hours a day. Every saddlebag in northern Mexico from 1850 to 1920 carried frijoles de la olla. They are still simple. They still work. They were the meal a vaquero shared with the dog that rode beside him. And here's the thing nobody tells you. The pinto bean cooked overnight in your grandmother's clay pot tastes nothing like the pinto bean cooked in your aluminum pot in 40 minutes. The clay holds the heat low and even. It is the difference between a song and a recording of a song. That is empowerment a vaquero understood without ever using the word. Your abuela understands it too. Number 20, Migas de campo at sunrise. The vaquero broke yesterday's hard tortillas into a hot iron skillet, cracked 2 eggs over them, added a spoon of salsa from a jar, and stirred until the egg coated every shard. The whole thing took 4 minutes. He ate it from the skillet itself with a folded tortilla because washing dishes was for women in kitchens, and his hands had to be on a rope by 6 in the morning. Migas means crumbs. The dish was invented to use up what you had, which was the only reason a poor man's food ever survived. Today you can order migas in a Houston brunch spot for $14. The vaquero of 1885 made it for the cost of 1 egg. Your great-grandmother could have told you that. The grandmothers in San Antonio and El Paso still make migas every Saturday morning. The pan is the same. The hands are older. The recipe has not been improved in 140 years. Number 19, Chicharrones in a paper twist. When a hog was slaughtered on the ranch in November, the fat was rendered for 2 days in a copper pot. The crackling skin floated to the top and was lifted out, salted, and pressed into a sheet of brown butcher paper twisted at both ends like a candy. A vaquero on a long ride untwisted the paper, ate 2 or 3 pieces with water, and retwisted the rest. They were salty. They got him through to sundown when the rest of the food was waiting at camp. A grandmother in Hermosillo, Sonora today still wraps chicharrones in the same paper twist, only the paper is now a brown lunch sack from a Walmart. The principle has not changed in 140 years. The fat keeps, the salt keeps, your strength keeps. You walk past the chicharrones at the carniceria window every Saturday and do not buy any. Your great-grandfather rode 40 miles on a fistful. Number 18, the rope of dried chilies tied to the saddle. Not exactly a meal, but every vaquero from 1860 to 1910 rode with a small ristra, a foot long, tied to the saddle horn or the back ring. Dried chiles de árbol or guajillos threaded on a string, light as paper. The vaquero broke one off and chewed it with his beans, his beef, his tortillas. A chile is empowerment in a small package. It made bad water taste better. It killed the dullness in dried meat. It kept a tired man awake on the ride home in the dark. In Chihuahua, they say a vaquero without a ristra was a man without a wife. He could survive the trail. But the ride was longer and the food tasted older. The thing your abuela kept by her stove in a clay jar, dried chiles of every shape, is the same thing your great-great-grandfather kept on his saddle. The kitchen and the saddle were never as far apart as you now pretend. Number 17, salsa matcha in a small glass jar. A spoonful of dried chile, garlic, peanut, and oil, fried slow in a clay pan, sealed in a glass jar with a tight lid, slipped into a felt sock to keep the glass from breaking against the saddle leather. The vaquero opened the jar once a day, dipped a tortilla in, and ate. Salsa matcha keeps for 2 months without refrigeration because the oil seals out the air. Generations of mothers in Veracruz figured this out without ever opening a chemistry book. The recipe was 4 ingredients. The jar was the size of a coffee cup. It was the difference between a good ride and a hungry one. The vaqueros of 1879 carried salsa matcha into Texas, and the Texans tasted it and said, "This is incredible," and then forgot the name. The Anglo cookbooks call it chili crisp now. You can pay $9 for a small jar at Whole Foods. Your great aunt in Jalapa still makes it on a Tuesday afternoon and gives it away to her neighbors for free. Number 16, chili colorado con carne seca. The most beautiful dish on this list. Strips of dried beef rehydrated in a sauce of dried red chile, garlic, oregano, and a little vinegar, simmered the night before in a clay pot, then ladled into a tin can with a tight lid. The next day at noon, the vaquero pried the lid open with the tip of his knife and ate the chili colorado cold, scooped up with a hard tortilla. The flavor was deeper than fresh meat ever got. The chile and the salt and the thyme had done the work. This was a Sunday meal that traveled. It was the dish a vaquero remembered when he was old and his ride was over. The grandmothers in Las Cruces, New Mexico still make chili colorado on Sunday afternoons. The pot has gotten newer. The recipe has not. You can taste 150 years of patience in a single spoonful, and most people who eat it have no idea what they are tasting. Your abuela does. She just does not say it out loud. Number 15, café de olla with a cinnamon stick. The clay pot at 5 in the morning. Coarse ground coffee, a chunk of piloncillo, a stick of cinnamon, sometimes a single clove. Boiled together for 10 minutes, then ladled into a tin cup. The vaquero drank his first cup standing at the fire and poured a second into a battered metal flask he had tied to his saddle with a strip of raw hide. By noon, the coffee was cold and bitter, and the vaquero drank it anyway. A man who has been on a horse for 6 hours stops caring about temperature. Café de olla goes back at least to the Mexican Revolution of 1910. The vaqueros of the King Ranch were drinking it 40 years before that. Some things were ancient before they had a name. Now, the thing nobody understands today is that the clay pot itself was the secret. The clay holds the cinnamon oil and the sugar. Your aluminum coffee maker cannot do that. It will never do that. Number 14, Galleta de campo, the hard biscuit. A flat round of flour, lard, and salt, baked twice in a Dutch oven until it was as hard as wood. Vaqueros called it Galleta. The Anglo cowboys in 1875 called it hardtack and complained about it. The vaquero did not complain. He soaked it in his coffee, broke it into his beans, ground it under his molars when bored on a long stretch. It survived rain. It survived fire. It survived the saddlebag of a man who fell off his horse 3 times in 1 week. A box of these biscuits fed a working man for a month and weighed less than 4 pounds. They were ugly. They were honest. They are the reason the cattle drives from Brownsville to Abilene ever finished. The Galleta de campo is a forgotten ancestor of the Triscuit you eat now. The Galleta cost a vaquero nothing because his mother made it on a Sunday afternoon for the month ahead. Number 13, Cecina folded in waxed paper. Beef sliced as thin as paper, salted and air-dried in the cool months. The town of Yecapixtla in Morelos has been making cecina for 400 years. The vaquero folded a sheet the size of a man's palm into a square of waxed butcher paper and tucked it into the saddlebag. At noon, he laid it on a hot rock, let it crisp for 2 minutes, and ate it like a cracker with a fold of tortilla. Cecina is the older brother of carne seca. It has more salt, it has more flavor, it has more memory. The grandmothers who slice it still cut it with the same long, thin knives their mothers used. That is empowerment in a single sheet of meat. Yecapixtla today still hosts a Cecina festival in August where the whole town slices beef on long wooden tables in the square. You can fly there from Houston in 5 hours. Your great-grandfather did not need a festival. He needed a square of cecina in his saddlebag and a horse that could go 14 hours. Number 12. Queso asadero wrapped in corn husk. A young white cheese, soft enough to melt, made from raw cow's milk on the ranch the morning the vaquero rode out. His wife pressed a small disc of it into a fresh corn husk, folded the husk closed, and tied it with twine. He ate it at midday over a small fire, the husk peeled back, the cheese held over the coals on the tip of the knife until it bubbled. He laid the melted cheese on a tortilla, folded it, and called it lunch. Queso asadero translates as roasting cheese. The vaquero of 1875 who carried it was eating something his great-great-grandmother had made the same way in Chihuahua in 1750. The recipe was older than the United States itself. The cacique brand of queso asadero you buy at H-E-B today is industrial. It works in a pinch. It is not the same. The version made on a ranch the morning of the ride had a flavor that the industrial version you eat cannot reach. Some things lose more in the factory than they gain. Number 11. Piloncillo, the cone of brown sugar. A solid brown cone the size of a child's fist. Pure cane sugar boiled down, poured into a wooden mold, dried for a week. The vaquero kept one in his saddlebag wrapped in a piece of cloth. When his energy dropped on a long afternoon ride, he scraped a few flakes off with his knife and let them dissolve on his tongue. Piloncillo is sugar with the molasses still in it. It tastes like rum and earth and burnt caramel. A working cowboy on the trail today would call it an energy bar. The vaquero of 1880 called it Tuesday afternoon. One cone lasted a week. The flavor lasted a lifetime. Your abuela in San Antonio still keeps a piloncillo cone wrapped in newspaper in a kitchen drawer. She uses it for Capirotada in March. She uses it for café de olla every morning. She has never bought white sugar in her life. White sugar is a tax you pay for forgetting your grandmother. Piloncillo is what your grandmother taught you instead. Number 10. Champurrado thickened with masa. Hot chocolate, but not the kind you know. Water, masa harina, a chunk of Mexican chocolate, a stick of cinnamon, a cone of piloncillo, whisked with a wooden molinillo until it foamed at the rim of the pot. The vaquero drank it standing by the breakfast fire and poured a second mug into a thermos flask. 3 hours later, the masa had thickened the drink to almost a porridge. He ate it with a spoon from horseback. Champurrado was the breakfast a vaquero's mother made when she wanted him to ride strong all day. It is the drink that fueled the men who built the King Ranch in Kingsville, Texas in the 1860s. Today, most American kitchens have never heard of it. The Latina grandmothers in East Los Angeles still make it on cold December mornings before the family wakes up. The smell wakes the children. The taste teaches them. The recipe is in their hands, not in a book. That is how a tradition survives. Number 9. Atole de maiz at dawn. Before the sun came up over the camp, the cook stirred a pot of atole, the simplest of all Mexican drinks. Toasted corn flour, water, a touch of cinnamon, a piece of brown sugar. The vaquero drank it warm from a tin mug and felt his hands stop shaking from the cold. Atole has been drunk in this part of the world for 1,000 years. The Aztecs drank it in 1450. The vaqueros drank it in 1875. Their grandsons drank it in a Tucson cafeteria in 1962 and called it gruel because they had forgotten the word. A drink that survives 1,000 years is not gruel. It is a tradition that learned how to ride a horse. The thing nobody on a phone today understands is that atole is not a recipe. Atole is the technology that made a working day possible in a culture without breakfast cereal. Cereal was invented in 1893. Atole was already old when Cortez arrived. The math is not subtle. Number 8. Carne guisada from the night fire. The night before a long ride in 1882, the camp cook stewed shoulder beef with onion, garlic, cumin, and a fistful of dried chili in a heavy iron pot. He let it simmer 3 hours over the embers. In the morning, he ladled the cold guisada into a tin lunch pail and handed one to each vaquero. The cold beef stew sat in the saddlebag all morning. The vaquero ate it at noon, sitting under a mesquite, scooping the meat onto a tortilla with his fingers. Carne guisada is the grandfather of every modern beef stew on a Texas menu. It came from a Mexican kitchen, then a Mexican fire, then a Mexican saddlebag, then an Anglo restaurant, and finally a freezer aisle in your local H-E-B. The English word stew does not do it justice. The vaquero called it dinner and ate it for breakfast. The grandsons buy a frozen tray of beef tips at H-E-B for $9 and call it dinner. The dish is the same. The hands that made it are gone. Number 7. Frijoles charros in a clay jar. The cowboy bean. Pinto beans cooked overnight with bacon, tomato, onion, cilantro, and serrano chile. The name charros means cowboys. The beans were named after the men who ate them. A vaquero packed a small clay jar of them into the saddlebag, the lid tied down with a strip of leather, the whole thing wrapped in a wet cloth to keep it cool. By noon, the beans had cooled to the temperature of the air. He ate them with a horn spoon and a hard tortilla, sitting on a rock by a stock tank. Frijoles charros are still cooked the same way today on ranches from San Antonio to Hermosillo. The recipe has not been improved in 150 years because it does not need to be. The thing most people miss about Mexican cooking is that it was perfected before America became America. Your great-great-grandmother in Saltillo was making frijoles charros while George Washington was still alive. The bean was older, the cook was better, the fire was the same. Number 6. Tortillas de harina folded into the bag. Flour tortillas, not corn. The flour tortilla was a Sonoran invention, born on the ranches of northern Mexico in the 1700s when wheat reached the desert. The mother rolled them out at 4 in the morning, cooked them on a hot comal, stacked 12 of them, wrapped the stack in a clean cloth, and pushed it into the saddlebag. A flour tortilla folded in half is a plate, a wrapper, a spoon, a napkin, and a meal. It does not crumble. It does not break. It rolls a piece of dried beef and a smear of salsa into a working man's lunch. Sonoran grandmothers in Hermosillo and Magdalena de Quino still measure flour by handfuls instead of cups. The tortillas come out the same every time. The hand knows, the cup does not. There is no factory in America that has ever produced a flour tortilla as good as your Sonoran grandmothers. There is also no Sonoran grandmother who would brag about that. She would just hand you another one off the comal and tell you to eat. Number 5. Pan de campo, the cowboy bread. Flour, baking powder, salt, lard, water, mixed in a tin pan, patted into a flat round, baked in a Dutch oven over the coals. The vaquero broke off chunks at noon and ate it with beans. In 2005, the state of Texas declared pan de campo the official state bread by a vote in Austin. The vaqueros of 1855 had been baking it on the Nueces Strip for 100 years before any state knew about it. It is the bread that built the King Ranch. It is the bread that fed Los Caneños on the long drives north toward Kansas. It is the bread that fed a 15-year-old vaquero in 1872 who is buried now under a mesquite tree somewhere on the Nueces and whose grandsons live in Houston and have never tasted it. Your grandsons should taste it. Your daughter should taste it. The recipe is on the back of the King Ranch cookbook and on no shelf in any modern American grocery store. It is one of the simplest breads ever made. It is also one of the most forgotten. Number 4. Pinole, the toasted corn powder. Now, this is the meal that decided whether a vaquero survived a 3-day ride. Whole corn kernels toasted in a clay pan until they smelled like burnt caramel, then ground on a metate to a fine powder, then mixed with a little ground cinnamon and a pinch of cocoa. The vaquero spooned 3 tablespoons into a cloth twist and pushed it into the saddlebag. When his hunger came at the wrong hour, he poured a spoonful into his palm, mixed it with a swallow of water, and drank it down. Pinole has fueled the Tarahumara runners of the Sierra Madre for 1,000 years. They run 100 miles in a single day on this powder. A vaquero on a 14-hour ride needed less. The grandmothers who ground pinole on the metate started before dawn, every day. No kitchen in America today grinds its own corn. No working cowboy in Texas today carries a twist of pinole. We lost something simple and powerful, and most of us do not know we lost it. The thing the running magazines never mention when they sell you $50 protein powder is that the original protein powder was free, was made from corn, was 300 years old in 1872, and was carried by every vaquero on every cattle drive between Tampico and the Rio Grande. Pinole is the food that built northern Mexico's working class. It is the food your great-great-grandmother carried to the field at sunrise. It is the food we let go. Number 3. Machaca con huevo at the morning camp. The breakfast that built the cattle drive. Strips of dried beef, pounded with a smooth riverstone until the meat shredded into soft fibers. The cook in the camp threw the shreds into a hot iron skillet with a little fat cracked 4 eggs over the top and stirred them together with a wooden spoon. He spooned the machaca onto a hot flour tortilla, rolled it tight, and handed it to the vaquero with a tin mug of coffee. The man ate it standing up in 20 seconds before the horse was saddled. Machaca is the dish of Sonora and Chihuahua. Every grandmother in those states still pounds dried beef on a wooden board on Saturday mornings. The pounding is part of the cooking. So is the patience. A working vaquero ate machaca at sunrise in 1879 and felt full until 2 in the afternoon. No granola bar ever invented does that. The grandsons of the vaqueros are now in Phoenix and Los Angeles eating cereal from a box. Their grandmothers are still alive in Hermosillo and Tucson. They could ask. Most will not. The thing that breaks your heart if you sit with it is that machaca con huevo is not a difficult recipe. It is 2 ingredients and a fire. Your abuela can teach you in 15 minutes. The number of grandsons who have never asked is in the tens of thousands. That is what we mean when we say a meal is forgotten. The grandmother is still there. The recipe is still there. Only your question is gone. Number 2. Tasajo, the salted beef strips. A handful of dried beef, salted heavy, cut into strips as long as a man's middle finger and as thin as a leather lace. The vaquero pulled a strip out of the saddlebag and chewed on it for an hour while he rode. The salt kept him hydrated. The protein kept him standing. Tasajo is the older cousin of beef jerky. It is harder. It is saltier. It lasts longer. The cattle drives from Brownsville to Abilene, Kansas in the 1870s ran on Tasajo. The vaqueros called it the meat that did not die. It traveled in a leather pouch, untouched by water or fire, and emerged from the saddlebag 3 weeks later, still good to eat. The grandmothers in Coahuila still cut tasajo by hand on a wooden block, sharpening their knives twice a day. The strips hang to dry on a wire stretched across the patio. The wind does the rest. The Oaxacan version of tasajo is famous in Mexican restaurants today. The northern version, the one your great-grandfather actually carried, is almost gone. You can buy it in a few carnicherias in Eagle Pass and Laredo. You cannot buy it in any supermarket north of the border. That is a small thing and a large thing at the same time. Number 1. Carne seca, the sun-dried beef of the desert. The most important food on this list. The food that built northern Mexico. Thin slabs of beef salted, hung on a wire in the desert sun for 2 days, brought in at sundown to keep the dew off, hung again at dawn. The result was a slab of meat as light as paper and as durable as leather. The vaquero of 1872, who carried a square of carne seca in waxed paper, carried 2 weeks of food in a package the size of a wallet. He ate it cold. He ate it crumbled into beans. He ate it shredded into eggs in the morning. His mother had made it. Her mother had made it. Her mother had made it. Sonora and Chihuahua have been making carne seca since before the United States existed. The desert sun is the only oven that ever cured it. The grandmothers still hang it on the wire in their backyards in Tucson, Nogales, Hermosillo. The grandsons walk past it on their way to the supermarket and buy beef jerky in a plastic bag for $8 an ounce. It is not the same. It never will be. The square of carne seca is gone from most American saddlebags forever, and most American kitchens have never seen it. The grandmother in your family who still knows how to cure beef on a wire is probably 80 years old right now. She is not going to be there in 20 years. Ask her. Watch her hands. Write down what she does. The thing most people do not realize is that the recipe is not in a book and never has been. It is in a pair of hands that learned from another pair of hands. When those hands stop moving, the recipe stops moving. That is the saddest line in this whole list. The leather saddlebag from 1872 has not been opened in a long time. The vaquero who rode out with it on the Nueces Strip is gone. His mother is gone. His grandmother is gone. The 4 things she packed are still alive, though, in kitchens in Sonora, in Chihuahua, in a few backyards in Tucson and El Paso. They are not gone. They are forgotten. Open the bag. Pack one of these meals this week. Pinole on a Sunday morning. a square of carne seca on a Saturday afternoon. Hand it to your son. Tell him whose grandmother carried it on horseback. That is how a meal stays alive.